Now, in Emeritus Newsbrief, I'm Lynn Huston. The conference committee version of the stimulus bill passed easily in the House. Such was not the case in the Senate, where Democrats needed 60 votes to pass it. Voting was suspended for a while when Democrats reached 59, but the man with the 60th vote was out of town. Spending the day in Ohio for his mother's funeral, Senator Sherrod Brown was flown back to Washington by military jet on White House orders to cast his vote, giving the Democrats the 60 votes needed to pass it shortly before 11 p.m. Eastern Time Friday night. After passing the House earlier in the day, supporters and opponents made their last stand in the Senate before voting.
I want to say again, Mr. President, my side of the aisle for 8 years did not include the other side of the aisle. We were guilty. We were guilty of not observing the rights and privileges of the minority party, and I do not excuse it, nor do I rationalize it. But I do believe that some members did work in a bipartisan fashion, and the times are different. The times are different. The American people spoke. So, yesterday, not the Republican leadership, not the majority of my colleagues, sat by while the bill was finally written. And that's why final legislation here will have 3 Republican votes, probably out of all the Republicans in the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. May pick up a couple in the House, but to call this bipartisan is clearly an inaccurate and false description.
And we enacted bipartisan legislation to give President Bush about $150 billion to send back to families in checks of $300 or $600 in the hopes that that would breathe some life back into the economy, cause people to go out and spend more money, buy more goods and services, invigorate businesses, save and create jobs. We did it. We signed up for that approach. It didn't work. Then President Bush came to us and said, I need $700 billion. It was a staggering amount of money, but we were told by Secretary Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury, Ben Bernanke, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and others, that if we didn't do it and do it quickly, the economy could go into a crisis which could be felt worldwide. And I voted for it. At the end of the day, $350 billion was spent, and I'm afraid to say very little positive occurred. In fact, we're still trying to get an accurate accounting of what happened to that money.
During his weekend address, President Obama said he would sign the $787 billion stimulus bill shortly.
Once the plan is put into action, a new website, recovery.gov, will allow any American to watch where the money goes and weigh in with comments and questions. And I encourage every American to do so. Ultimately, this is your money, and you deserve to know where it's going and how it's spent. This historic step won't be the end of what we do to turn our economy around, but rather the beginning. The problems that led us into this crisis are deep and widespread, and our response must be equal to the task.
Obama is expected to sign the bill Monday or Tuesday. You can see the president's entire weekend address following this update on the Mogulus Emeritus News window. You can also get a copy of the current version of the stimulus bill just passed by both houses on the Emeritus News National World page. 4 more banks biting the dust in Friday night takeovers. The FDIC identified the 4 failed banks as Pinnacle Bank, Beaverton, Oregon, Cornbelt Bank and Trust, Pittsfield, Illinois, Riverside Bank of the Gulf Coast, Cape Coral, Florida, and Sherman County Bank, Loop City, Nebraska. They've all been sold off to other banks. Details on the Emeritus News Financial Pensions page. The most serious cutbacks for Toyota in the last 50 years. The company says April shutdowns at its North American plants will vary from 2 to 8 days. It will also cut 8 hours from each 2-week pay period, cut executive pay up to 30%, and offer buyouts to 18,000 workers. Effects at each plant will vary according to company and union rules, also production requirements. More on the Emeritus News employment page. In health news, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have approved bariatric surgery as a last resort for treatment of type 2 diabetes in obese patients. The agencies had approved the surgery in the past to treat such things as hypertension and heart disease. Bariatric surgery involves intestinal diversion to help patients lose weight. More on that story on the Emeritus News healthcare page. The much embattled Peanut Corporation of America has filed for Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy at a federal court in Lynchburg, Virginia, where the company is based. The filing comes in the midst of a criminal investigation and a growing number of civil lawsuits. The company was accused of selling peanut butter it knew was tainted with salmonella, which caused a national salmonella outbreak in various products, killing 9 people, sickening more than 600. Officials recently traced more tainted product to a previously unknown plant that the company operated in Texas. It was unlicensed and never inspected. The latest on the biggest issues and public policy at emeritusnews.com. That's an Emeritus News Brief. I'm Lynn Huston.